Chapter 11 of The People of the Abyss. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Peter Yearsley. The People of the Abyss by Jack London. Chapter 11. The Peg. But after carrying the banner all night, I did not sleep in Green Park when morning dawned. I was wet to the skin, it is true, and I had had no sleep for 24 hours. But still adventuring as a penniless man looking for work, I had to look about me first for a breakfast and next for the work. During the night I had heard of a place over on the Surrey side of the Thames where the Salvation Army every Sunday morning gave away a breakfast to the unwashed. And, by the way, the men who carry the banner are unwashed in the morning, and unless it is raining they do not have much show for a wash either. This, thought I, is the very thing. Breakfast in the morning, and then the whole day in which to look for work. It was a weary walk. Down St. James Street I dragged my tired legs, along Pall Mall, past Trafalgar Square, to the Strand. I crossed the Waterloo Bridge to the Surrey side, cut across to Blackfriars Road coming out near the Surrey Theatre, and arrived at the Salvation Army barracks before 7 o'clock. This was the Peg, and by the Peg in the argot is meant the place where a free meal may be obtained. Here was a motley crowd of woebegone wretches who had spent the night in the rain. Such prodigious misery, and so much of it. Old men, young men, all manner of men, and boys to boot, and all manner of boys. Some were drowsing, standing up. Half a score of them were stretched out on the stone steps in most painful postures, all of them sound asleep, the skin of their bodies showing red through the holes and rents in their rags. And up and down the street, and across the street for a block either way, each doorstep had from 2 to 3 occupants, all asleep, their heads bent forward on their knees. And it must be remembered these are not hard times in England. Things are going on very much as they ordinarily do, and times are neither hard nor easy. And then came the policeman. "Get out of that, you blooming swine! Ugh, ugh, get out now!" And like swine he drove them from the doorways, and scattered them to the 4 winds of Surrey. But when he encountered the crowd asleep on the steps, he was astounded. "Shocking!" he exclaimed. "Shocking! And of a Sunday morning! A pretty sight! Ugh, ugh! Get out of that, you bleeding nuisances!" Of course it was a shocking sight. I was shocked myself, and I should not care to have my own daughter pollute her eyes with such a sight, or come within half a mile of it. But, and there we were, and there you are, and but is all that can be said. The policeman passed on, and back we clustered, like flies around a honey jar. For was there not that wonderful thing, a breakfast, awaiting us? We could not have clustered more persistently and desperately had they been giving away $1,000,000 banknotes. Some were already off to sleep, when back came the policeman, and away we scattered, only to return again as soon as the coast was clear. At 7:30 a little door opened, and a Salvation Army soldier stuck out his head. "Ain't no sense blocking the way up that way," he said. "Those as has tickets can come in now, and those as hasn't can't come in till 9. Oh, that breakfast! 9 o'clock! An hour and a half longer. The men who held tickets were greatly envied. They were permitted to go inside, have a wash, and sit down and rest until breakfast, while we waited for the same breakfast on the street. The tickets had been distributed the previous night on the streets and along the Embankment, and the possession of them was not a matter of merit, but of chance. At 8:30 more men with tickets were admitted, and by 9 the little gate was opened to us. We crushed through somehow, and found ourselves packed in a courtyard like sardines. On more occasions than one, as a Yankee tramp in Yankee land, I have had to work for my breakfast, but for no breakfast did I ever work so hard as for this one. For over 2 hours I had waited outside, and for over another hour I waited in this packed courtyard. I had had nothing to eat all night, and I was weak and faint, while the smell of the soiled clothes and unwashed bodies, steaming from pent animal heat and blocked solidly about me, nearly turned my stomach. So tightly were we packed that a number of the men took advantage of the opportunity and went soundly asleep standing up. Now, about the Salvation Army in general I know nothing, and whatever criticism I shall make here is of that particular portion of the Salvation Army which does business on Blackfriars Road near the Surrey Theatre. In the first place, this forcing of men who have been up all night to stand on their feet for hours longer is as cruel as it is needless. We were weak, famished, and exhausted from our night's hardship and lack of sleep, and yet there we stood, and stood, and stood, without rhyme or reason. Sailors were very plentiful in this crowd. It seemed to me that 1 man in 4 was looking for a ship, and I found at least a dozen of them to be American sailors. In accounting for their being on the beach, I received the same story from each and all, and from my knowledge of sea affairs, this story rang true. English ships sign their sailors for the voyage, which means the round trip, sometimes lasting as long as 3 years, and they cannot sign off and receive their discharges until they reach the home port, which is England. Their wages are low, their food is bad, and their treatment worse. Very often they are really forced by their captains to desert in the New World or the colonies, leaving a handsome sum of wages behind them, a distinct gain either to the captain or the owners, or to both. But whether for this reason alone or not, it is a fact that large numbers of them desert. Then, for the home voyage, the ship engages whatever sailors it can find on the beach. These men are engaged at the somewhat higher wages that obtain in other portions of the world, under the agreement that they shall sign off on reaching England. The reason for this is obvious, for it would be poor business policy to sign them for any longer time, since seamen's wages are low in England, and England is always crowded with sailormen on the beach. So this fully accounted for the American seamen at the Salvation Army barracks. To get off the beach in other outlandish places, they had come to England, and gone on the beach in the most outlandish place of all. There were fully a score of Americans in the crowd, the non-sailors being tramps royal, the men whose mate is the wind that tramps the world. They were all cheerful, facing things with the pluck which is their chief characteristic, and which seems never to desert them. Withal, they were cursing the country with lurid metaphors quite refreshing after a month of unimaginative, monotonous Cockney swearing. The Cockney has one oath, and one oath only, the most indecent in the language, which he uses on any and every occasion. Far different is the luminous and varied Western swearing, which runs to blasphemy rather than indecency. And, after all, since men will swear, I think I prefer blasphemy to indecency. There is an audacity about it, an adventurousness and defiance that is better than sheer filthiness. There was one American tramp royal whom I found particularly enjoyable. I first noticed him on the street, asleep in a doorway, his head on his knees, but a hat on his head that one does not meet this side of the Western Ocean. When the policeman routed him out, he got up slowly and deliberately, looked at the policeman, yawned and stretched himself, looked at the policeman again, as much as to say he didn't know whether he would or wouldn't, and then sauntered leisurely down the sidewalk. At the outset I was sure of the hat, but this made me sure of the wearer of the hat. In the jam inside I found myself alongside of him, and we had quite a chat. He had been through Spain, Italy, Switzerland, and France, and had accomplished the practically impossible feat of beating his way 300 miles on a French railway without being caught at the finish. "Where was I hanging out?" he asked. "And how did I manage for kipping?" which means sleeping. "Did I know the rounds yet?" He was getting on, though the country was hostile, and the cities were bum. Fierce, wasn't it? Couldn't batter, beg, anywhere without being pinched. But he wasn't going to quit it. Buffalo Bill's show was coming over soon, and a man who could drive 8 horses was sure of a job any time. These mugs over here didn't know beans about driving anything more than a span. What was the matter with me hanging on and waiting for Buffalo Bill? He was sure I could ring in somehow. And so, after all, blood is thicker than water. We were fellow countrymen, and strangers in a strange land. I had warmed to his battered old hat at sight of it, and he was as solicitous for my welfare as if we were blood brothers. We swapped